Hey folks, welcome to today's session. I'm super excited for the conversation we're going to have today with a brewmaster. I know that's not the typical job roles and professions that most people think of. However, it's a role that is so unique and something I didn't even know existed until, of course, I turned 21. I know a lot of the folks that are listening are likely not of age to drink beer yet. However, there are educational institutions like UC Davis that have brewing programs, which is super cool. And I'm sure some of you might be interested in learning more about it. So we have a phenomenal brewmaster to join us today from one of my favorite breweries, HenHouse, to share more about his path. Before we introduce our guest, for those that haven't been here to our channel just yet, my name is Tiffany Fu, and I am a college and career service provider, very passionate about helping professionals and students figure out their career path, especially through post-secondary education. So go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel / podcast so you can get all things college and career here. All right, let's go ahead and introduce our guest, Zach Kelly. Hi, Zach. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. It's going to be so much fun. And if you can just share a little bit more about what you do exactly as a brewmaster and the educational path that you've done as well as doing right now.
My job as brewmaster really at this point is to kind of guide the direction of the production department in this brewery. So I have about 14 direct reports right now. So those are brewers, cellarmen, and packaging folks, and then some leads in between there. So my job at this point is less hands-on, though I did do a lot of scrubbing floors and bottling and packaging and brewing sugar water to get myself here. My educational background is I started college out of high school in communications and actually theater. And then I've recently, in the past couple of years, started going back to school to study environmental science.
That's awesome. Which school is that you're studying at?
So right now I'm at the Santa Rosa Junior College. And then depending on how this all shakes out, I might switch over to Sonoma State. So both places up here in Santa Rosa, the North Bay.
Yeah, I actually just visited Sonoma State. It's just such a gorgeous campus. And it was interesting because a lot of the buildings were named after different, I think, wines, right? It was like a Zinfandel building and Chardonnay. It was really cool.
Yeah, you'll find a lot of that here. My town also has, things like Riesling Lane and all that kind of stuff here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I love that you are continuing your path on education, Zach. That's great. All right, let's jump into the first question. When did you know you wanted to get into this industry and become a brewmaster?
So I pretty much, when I started this career, I was working in a dead retail location that was closing. And so what ended up happening was that this spot called Keegan Ales in upstate New York, it's still there. It's one of the first craft breweries in the Hudson Valley.
Mm-hmm.
They had an opening coming, and a good friend of mine was like, hey, we just need somebody that can wants to do some grunt work, move kegs, clean stuff, do deliveries out of the back of a pickup and stuff like that, part-time. And I was like, yeah, of course. Went in there, got a good workout my first week. And that part-time gig turned into a full-time gig pretty quickly. And it was a 3-man operation. So it's basically the head brewer, myself, and then one other guy that were all just kind of the extra hands of the brewery. And as we continued to grow, more responsibility was there. Just ended up stepping up, and about 6 months later, I was starting to go in at 5 o'clock in the morning and learn to mash in, and what the kind of rhythm was for cleaning, brewing, and going from there. And my real goal was just to keep getting better at it and learning more, and figure out how to kind of let that be my career.
That's awesome, Zach. And we talk a lot about this on our channel, is happenstance. It just happened that someone needed you to step up. You rose up to the challenge and obviously did a great job in having a very successful career in this space too. So great work.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that for just what that trajectory ended up being was I was there for as a brewer at Keegan Ales for a couple of years. Ended up doing some kind of production manager work there and doing more scheduling and everything. And then my beautiful wife got her master's in library science.
Oh,
So we moved across the country to pursue that. I worked at another brewery for a while, and then we ended up coming out to California, which is where her family and good friends are. And I got the job at Russian River Brewing.
mm,
I was the lead brewer there for about 5 years, and then I just recently made the transition to HenHouse Brewing as brewmaster about 6 months ago.
that's great. In 5 years, that's is that like a long time within the field at a certain brewery, or like what's the average?
There seems to be, I mean, it's a really still fledgling industry in a lot of ways. So
Mm,
I remember it being a really big milestone at Keegan Ales when the country reached about 1,700 craft breweries. And at this point, we're over 8,000 with unknown number in planning right now. So probably between 1 and 2,000 are in planning if I were just to hazard a
wow.
guess. But that doesn't account for, pipe dreams and, money hid under the bed and swear jars to buy brewery equipment.
That's a great point that you look at the data of how many breweries are currently, how much is growing, what it's almost like 7 times as much when you enter the field. And the job outlook for you, it seems like it's only going to be going up higher and more opportunities. All right. That's great.
Yeah. So it's definitely my time there seems like kind of middle of the road. There's a lot of people, a lot of folks that are, kind of get their feet wet and decide that they want to open their own spot. There's some guys that have just been at the same spot for 30 years.
Mhm.
So it's a real, especially because with all these new breweries opening, that there's definitely a bit of like the old guard for some of the
Mhm.
older places. Some of like the really large places, the Genesees and the Yinlings and stuff like that have people that have just been there for their whole lives, and
Yeah.
then there's a lot of new places where people are just getting into their careers for their lives.
Awesome. Next thing I wanted to discuss with you is what type of preparation really was required to enter in this field. I know that you kind of took the untraditional happenstance route. Maybe you can chat about that, and then also the traditional way that you've seen like other folks do as well.
So yeah, my rags to riches story was a little bit more scrappy. I just kind of fell into this position. I knew people there. Again, my a lot of my journey can be tied into some who I know and who I became friends with and who I networked with. It is a very open community. It's very collaborative, which I've always really loved about it. So getting to know people and a lot of like homebrew clubs and stuff like that, you'll find a lot of folks coming in from. As far as the like more traditional education paths, there are great programs. There are more brewing programs opening all over the place now.
Mhm.
Siebel is a very old institution. That's one that has like a transfer program. So you do some time in Germany and then you do some time in Chicago if you decide to do that.
Wow.
A lot of places have decided to transition to some online stuff. So I believe Siebel has a hybrid online program as well.
Mhm.
Um, UC Davis is one of the oldest and most well regarded brewing science programs in the
Mhm.
country and in the world, really. Um, if you really want to go to Germany, you can do Weißstefan and learn the classic way to become a traditional titled brewmaster.
Mhm.
But there's just so many ways to do it. UC Davis also works with the Master Brewers Association of Americas,
Mm.
which is a professional organization. They take memberships from student memberships and stuff like that as well. So there's always, that kind of path where they have like more intensive courses. So you can do like 2 weeks at a time. You can go learn
Mhm.
basics of engineering, packaging, cellaring, stuff like that. Um, so that's kind of like the pathway that one might want to take for really traditional brewing, industry specific backgrounds, but
Mhm.
there are a lot of other paths that you can take. There's a lot of educational backgrounds that tie really well into this industry.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and thank you for mentioning the different programs out there, like building that college list and doing research on the different programs and what is the best match for you culturally as well. There's a lot of research that goes into it, so thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I know that you mentioned earlier there's a lot of science that's related within the field of making beer. So, for the students listening, what type of classes do you really recommend that they really focus on, and different preparation, either it be internships, externships, shadowing programs that you would recommend?
So depending on like what your focus is, there's really, or your interests are, there's really a
Mhm.
lot of things that you can do. So in the labs that the lab folks that we've had at my past couple of breweries, we've had people that are like really great at management and just have like more of a general background. One of my friends was agricultural science from UC Davis, and she ended up being a lab manager for a bunch of places and had like a really wide, broad background. Whereas, you know, actually in my last two breweries, actually Left Hand and at Russian River Brewing, we had one person with their master's in biology, one person with a um, bachelor's in chemistry, and then actually the exact opposite on the next brewery, where we had one young woman with a bachelor's in bio and one with a master's in
Mm.
chemistry. So that's really whatever kind of makes you interested. Like yeast health is like a really huge part of the brewery house and the brewery. Which is all organic and biological science, whereas just being able to perform these tests and understanding a lot of the different chemicals that go into this and reagents and things that go into like the actual lab work and preparing media for samples and stuff. Like a chemistry background is also extremely relevant to doing any sort of lab or science work as far as a brewery is concerned.
You're experimenting and blessing our taste buds. So, thank you for all the effort and education that goes into it. Great. So, what do you really enjoy about this field and position, and what's challenging?
I really enjoy. I like working with my hands. Maybe a challenge right now is that I'm doing that a little bit less. But one of the things that you need to also worry about, and I can't stress enough if you get into production, is learn ergonomic lifting and make sure
Ooh,
that you really take that to heart, because your backs and your livers are generally things that go first when you're a production brewer. Um,
wow.
but as a side, yes, the physical labor is rewarding, but also something that you need to really keep be very mindful about your body and the way that you move and the way you're lifting. So that is both something that actually really is a double-edged sword on that. It is very, very nice to be able to come home and you're just tired and you've like really worked all day, and you've put something out the door that ultimately makes people laugh and enjoy themselves and are happy, and at the same time, like, just don't hurt your back.
Yeah.
um, in my current position, I really like the management aspect. I really like having helping a team and trying to foster these younger brewers that are, some of them are my age when I started, some of them are a little younger, some of them are a little older, and trying
Mhm.
to uh, kind of develop people and develop their skills and their knowledge, and trying to research and learn things that I haven't learned, just because questions come up from somebody that's been in the industry or just starting in the industry. They've been here for 3 months, and people will surprise you, and the last question will be like, I have no idea. I'm going to go
Mhm.
ahead and find that, and then I'm going to report back to you. And the same thing with people that have been in it for a really long time.
Yeah.
The collaboration and the teamwork is something that I really like. And big picture projects, and both in the sense of developing new processes or ways to scale up or ways to do things easier, versus the really nitty gritty processes of learning how
Yeah.
to just try to get another 2% viability or another 3% yield out of something, is also the kind of stuff that I'm really
Oh.
enjoying in my current position.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's definitely the dynamicism of the industry.
Mhm.
It is a production facility, and it is dealing with something that is created with through real life biological processes. So, um, trying to get as consistent as possible without ever in a constantly changing environment is both challenging and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you're pretty much never have a completely smooth day at the brewery. It's almost like if you go home and everything's completely wrapped up, like it feels like something is off, whether or not it went perfect or not.
Yeah, there's always more stuff to do. I'm so fascinated that you mentioned a challenge is ergonomic lifting, and that's something to pay attention to. I would have never thought that's something that you all had to do, because when we do go to these breweries, I see there's like forklifts and all that sorts, but obviously you still have to do labor overall. So,
Yeah, that's tends to be like an economy of scale kind of thing. Something that's really great about HenHouse is we do put the money into minimizing the amount that people have to, brute force anything or lift kegs or anything like that. We
mhm,
we tend to put quality of worker and quality of, um, working environment before we're putting, just being able to do things faster.
mhm,
We make sure to backflow from things that'll make it a little bit easier on the person, so that when we do get faster and have to
mhm,
do more, it's not as stressful. It's not just moving a box twice as fast. It's being able to do it the same speed but a little bit more efficiently.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the business aspect of it as well. There's so much more to being a brewmaster than mixing beer and figuring out what tastes good. So that's really eye-opening to hear about. And I'm curious, you say that there's oftentimes things aren't going to be the smoothest, which is how it is for all job fields. Are there times where like a batch of beer that you all made just isn't up to your quality? Like, what do you do about that, and how often does that happen?
doesn't happen often, luckily, but it kind of there's a lot of ways that you can deal with it depending on like what the actual issue is. Like if something isn't quite up to spec or it's very close, there's a lot of options for like blending away and stuff like that. So you can take a couple batches and kind of get them back into like whatever your spec is. So a place like New Belgium Brewing or even Anheuser-Busch, anything like that. I think the average number of batches in a single can of Busch is like in the hundreds, just because they do keep all these tests and everything and, hit these exact specifications. Um, Same with like a New Belgium Brewing. They did, almost 1 million barrels a year.
Mhm.
They have so many tests and inline different um, monitors and control systems that often you're not just putting one tank into one tank. You're often putting multiple batches worth of tanks into the final packaged product, so that all the specs and everything that you're looking for all balance out. So because it is like such an organic thing, even on that scale where you're doing millions of kegs a year, um, it's still like an organic process. So everything is always slightly different. So you spend a lot of time in the lab doing trials and blending things to make sure that everything's as uniform and as high quality as possible.
Yeah, that's great. There's a lot of technology used, it sounds like.
Yeah. And at the
And
end of the day, if it's just rotten, just take the hit, take
and
care of it.
it makes a lot of sense. You experimented with like smaller batch and then you do it at scale, it sounds like.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Learning a lot in this interview. Okay. Last one for you. Any advice that you have for students listening in that are interested in pursuing this field?
Yeah. Work on lifting, knowing that depending on what you're going to do or what you want to do, if you want to be in production, just know that it is a lot of the outside glamour disappears a little bit when you're in there lifting and sweating and doing hard work. It's not just drinking all day, um, which I mean it can be on the weekends, but so many paths to take that if you really want to be in the beer industry, there are a lot of ways to do it. Part of my going back for environmental science is that that's just something that we it is a very water and waste heavy industry. So like some of the projects I'm working on right now are how to like side stream our yeast and hop and trub and our waste product to see like if we can give it to somewhere where like Recology for use for their composting program, where they
Yeah.
actually take all this kind of effluent and they turn it back into compost for a lot of the local farms and stuff like that. Taking into consideration like the really high nutrient content of the stuff that we're side streaming or even just putting down the drain and trying to find a way to make better use of it. So environmental concerns are something that can be a career. Engineering is something that can really go into this too. You're building something like a $50 million facility, and it's got this intricate pipe work, and there's a lot of moving parts. So engineers are always somebody that can have a field here. Classic brewing science. You can also do, if you're interested in any sort of technology, packaging, biochemistry. Like there's really space for everybody in the field. Marketing. If you want to, we have a whole marketing team, and they have a whole marketing background. They're not brewing scientists, but they are excellent at what they do, and they get people into tasting rooms. So there's a little bit of everything for sure. I think you can take a very non-linear path like I did. I didn't necessarily need any theater background to become a brewmaster, though maybe sometimes it helps when I sit in situations like this. Who would have thought 17 years ago? I think you can really turn any path into that passion if you're dedicated to it, and there's a lot of resources out there to get you there.
Really good point. There's a lot of different ways to get into the field, and it's a business at the end of the day. So there's marketing functions, sales functions, and if this is a passion and interest for folks when it comes to beer overall, this could be a good option for them as well. And are there any internships or anything that HenHouse is doing?
We're not doing internships right now. We are just starting to have some conversations with UC Davis about doing like a mentorship program. So we're starting to look into figuring out how to do more stuff like this, more outreach directly to students, and trying to give them some coaching like this through that program. So a lot of these students have already decided that this is what they're going to focus on, what they want to do. So we're going to just starting to develop a program where we're going to be able to work with these students and kind of give them advice and answer questions and try to help them get where they want to be in their careers. As far as internships, like at HenHouse, we generally don't do internships, especially we don't participate in any like unpaid sort of labor or anything like that. I think that everybody should be paid for their time. But we're generally, if people are looking, we are pretty much always looking for packaging folks, and always keeping somebody in our hat. We are rapidly expanding, so there are opportunities for people that are interested in doing more than one element of that. There's always entry level jobs in logistics and packaging, and even sales sometimes. So there's and even just in the bars and the breweries and the tasting rooms, there's a lot of great ways to learn more about these opportunities and where you can kind of go and get a foot in.
And that's great to hear that HenHouse is partnering for the mentorship program, especially for UC Davis as well, being one of the premier programs. Zach, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot, and it's a good point. You're not just drinking beer all day and tasting beer. There's a lot that goes into it. And I especially loved learning about how there are a lot of different majors that you could dive into in order to enter the field as well.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad to have this conversation. And if anybody has any further follow-up or advice or anything that they need, feel free to reach out to Tiffany, and she will put you into contact with me. I'm always happy to try to help the next generation of great brewmasters.
All right, folks, that's all for today. Please go ahead and subscribe. We'll do more informational interviews such as this, and leave your comments below. As Zach's mentioned, if you have any questions about different programs, and we can try to get those answered for you as well. We'll see you next time.